Over the weekend, two senseless shootings resulting in over 30 people dead, multiple more injured, and yet the media and the Democratic Party seem united between a narrative of laying blame at the President of the United States, calling him a white nationalist and a perpetrator of bigotry and hatred. And today, the President addressed the nation.
This weekend, more than 80 people were killed or wounded in two evil attacks. One Saturday morning in El Paso, Texas, a wicked man went to a Walmart store where families were shopping with their loved ones. He shot and murdered 20 people and injured 26 others, including precious little children. Then, in the early hours of Sunday morning, Dayton, Ohio, another twisted monster opened fire on a crowded downtown street. He murdered 9 people, including his own sister, and injured 27 others. The First Lady and I join all Americans in praying and grieving for the victims, their families, and the survivors. And we vow to act with urgent resolve. The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul. First, we must do a better job of identifying and acting on early warning signs. I am directing the Department of Justice to work in partnership with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as social media companies, to develop tools that can detect mass shooters before they strike. As an example, the monster in the Parkland High School in Florida had many red flags against him, and yet nobody took decisive action. Nobody did anything. Why not? Second, we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately. Cultural change is hard, but each of us can choose to build a culture that celebrates the inherent worth and dignity of every human life. That's what we have to do. Third, we must reform our mental health laws to better identify mentally disturbed individuals who may commit acts of violence, and make sure those people not only get treatment, but when necessary, involuntary confinement. Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun. Fourth, we must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process. That is why I have called for red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders. Today, I'm also directing the Department of Justice to propose legislation ensuring that those who commit hate crimes and mass murders face the death penalty, and that this capital punishment be delivered quickly, decisively, and without years of needless delay.
The President clearly called for unity in addressing the problem, not simply addressing a symptom or a desired political outcome, but actually let's address the problem. He denounced white supremacy emphatically, denounced the idea of domestic terrorism being able to feel emboldened to do what they want to do to get their point across. He denounced it clearly, definitively. But rather than slap a Band-Aid on it or just to score political points, threaten your Second Amendment rights by proposing what Democrats always propose in these scenarios, which is a gun ban. Ban this gun, ban this style gun, ban this type of ammunition, do away with this type of bump stock, make sure that it takes people now 14 years to pass a background check in order to be able to purchase a firearm. He dispelled all of that today, and he dealt in 4 specific areas. Number 1, when somebody is clearly identified as having problems and is known in the community to be the kind of person that, keep an eye on this person, that needs to be taken seriously. That's why we had the Parkland shooting. This young man was all over social media talking openly about what he was going to do. He had had the police at his home multiple times. They didn't confiscate firearms. They didn't take him into any type of incarceration or detention or in any way take him off the streets. And then when he was opening fire in the school, you had deputies refusing to go inside and deal with him. The sheriff lost his job over this, which he should have, even after he participated in a CNN town hall debate and ravaged little Marco and Dana Lash from the NRA and stood up there with that David Hogue, that little terrorist that nobody wants to talk about, and his radical extremism and suspending all of our constitutional rights in the order of some type of false security safety. So what does the president say today? Hey, this shooter in Parkland, it was known what he was all about. Why wasn't something done? Great question. The president addressed the violent culture in which we live. As much as Hollyweird has taken to Twitter to ravage this president in recent days over every single issue you can imagine, what about their culpability in all of this? Movies get more and more violent and graphic. Video games, the culture itself is violent. And people who are already unstable feed into this, and it feeds them. It's funny. It's funny. We're told we should suspend our Second Amendment rights. Even if it only saves a few lives, it's better that a handful of crazies not get their hands on a firearm, and no American should have a firearm then if it keeps it out of the hands of somebody who's crazy, because the firearms are playing into this. Really? Firearms don't shoot themselves. Insane individuals wantonly take life. But what is it that feeds them? Well, obviously it's the president's rhetoric. It's his rallies. It's you guys on YouTube with your channels. Really? So your violent video games, your never-ending grotesque graphic war epics that aren't even remotely based on historical fact anymore, none of that plays in, none of that feeds their psyche. Oh, of course, that's just fantasy. That's just a way for normal people to be able to let off steam, and we can't help it if one or two crazies are inspired by it. Well, there's no constitutional right to have video games or wanton violent movies. Just saying. The president did deal with the fact that we need to screen better those with mental health issues, and I would agree with him. But I completely agree with him on the issue of the death penalty for individuals who wantonly commit mass murder or domestic terrorism. Absolutely. But let's take this in a little different direction, shall we? I addressed this in a previous video, and I'm going to come back to it. I find the timing of this very suspect. The fact that we are told very little about this shooter in Texas other than the narrative, the spin they want us to have. Somewhere, somebody is a little upset that this shooter actually walked away. Not because they felt justice would be better served had this shooter had to sacrifice his own life for the lives that he claimed of others, but at some point, this shooter is going to get a way to tell his story. And I got a feeling there are those that don't want his story out. And I'm not talking about they're trying to protect us from him trying to radicalize young people, and we can't let this monster have a microphone or a platform. No, I'm telling you, I'm very suspect of the timing and the so-called events of what happened. After the entire Mueller investigation implodes on national TV, with the culmination of the disastrous week the Democrats had after Mueller embarrassed himself and their cause at those hearings, and the president's numbers have been climbing, and he has been getting more and more done, and the American people are feeling better about the economy and the job that he's done. Shazam, Batman out of nowhere. Here it comes like almost on cue in a movie script. Let's have a mass shooting and wanton violence, and let's blame the president and the NRA and all you right-wingers. Let's tell you what was posted on his Facebook page, but we're not going to let you see any of it. No, nay, that's already been taken down. Again, I'm very suspect of the timing and who's actually involved and who this guy actually is. And notice they're saying almost nothing about the shooting in Dayton. They're applauding the mayor and the police for their quick work, which was excellent. But notice the mainstream media isn't talking about this person. The one in Dayton was a radicalized socialist. They didn't get a chance to paint him as a white nationalist. The truth accidentally got out that he was a radicalized socialist. And we want to talk about culpability in these shootings because I keep wanting to lay this at the feet of the president. How about at the feet of the mainstream media? That day in and day out, calling this president a racist, a bigot, stirring up this, talking about white privilege and white supremacists, and that the president is a dog whistle to these people, and this is why you have this wanton open violence now against people of color, against people on the left. Well, the more the media hypes all that and spins up all that, there's no crazies on the left? See, on the day when the pipe bomber, remember him? The guy living in the Trump van in Florida, mailing out pipe bombs to Democratic senators and well-known Democratic personalities. And yet, it was proven that he had association with the Democratic Party, pictures of him with Bill Clinton, pictures of him with Barack Obama at big DNC fundraising events. Yet all of a sudden, overnight he became a Trump supporter living in a van, mailing out pipe bombs to Democrats. Pipe bombs, which, by the way, not only didn't never go off, thank God, they were never designed to go off. It was to create a narrative. Now we find out that the shooter in Dayton, Ohio, was a leftist extremist. We have a leftist extremist, a supporter of Bernie Sanders, who went to a softball park one day to open fire on Republican congressmen preparing for a charity softball event. That doesn't get talked about. But boy, this shooting in El Paso, Texas, obviously he's a deranged Trump supporter. No, the more the media hypes all this up and tries to pick a side and push a narrative, well, crazos on the left begin to think, I better arm myself and get ready for this onslaught that's coming from the right. And where we're being played, people, and you listen to me, this goes left and right. This isn't about Democrat versus Republican, conservative versus liberal. This is about us versus them. What the deep state, elite, oligarch is creating here, they want civil war. That's not being talked about in this narrative this weekend. But Beto, yes, Beto the fake Latino, lays the blame squarely at the feet of the President of the United States.
You see a president who, in his first speech as a candidate for the highest office in the land, described Mexican immigrants as rapists and criminals, has been warning about the threats of caravans and asylum seekers who he's described as animals and an infestation, despite the fact that immigrants commit crimes at a far lower rate than do those who are born in this country, despite the fact that we are now in one of the safest cities in the United States of America, safe not despite, but because it is a city of immigrants. The president's language, his rhetoric, has produced the kinds of hate crimes that we saw in El Paso yesterday, but we've been seeing across this country. They've been on the rise for each one of the last 3 years. So we cannot act as though this were just some kind of natural disaster or a matter of course for this country or the new normal for the United States. There is a very real cause to this, and President Trump is part of that, but he exists in a racist environment that is being fueled by Fox News, by those who on the internet traffic in these conspiracy theories, the open hatred and intolerance that has found a home in people like the shooter and what he did yesterday.
How dare he? How dare he? How dare he? Because the president pointed out that there is a legitimate crisis at the border and there are wicked, evil, vile individuals using our problems at the border to smuggle in drugs, to commit human trafficking, and as wanton criminals to come in here and wreak havoc, death, and carnage on this side of the border. For the president to point that out, that makes him a bigot? Are you kidding me? And there's never any pushback from the media. Even the flunkos over at Fox News like Chris Wallace, they never push back on the fake narrative that the Democrats and the libloons love to push. Case in point, well, he certainly couldn't be outdone by the skateboarding Beto O'Rourke, so Pete Buttigieg, however you say his name, he had to one-up him on Fox News. And did Chris Wallace push back? No.
At least one of the other Democratic presidential candidates, Beto O'Rourke, has said that President Trump and his rhetoric bear some responsibility for the acts of this madman. Do you think that's fair?
Well, there's no question that white nationalism is condoned at the highest levels of our government. You know, when this kind of rhetoric happened 20 years ago when David Duke was trying to run for office as a Republican, the Republican Party was horrified. They couldn't run away fast enough. Right now, you see it being echoed by the White House, and there is a measure of responsibility that you just can't get away from when you have, you know, case after case of racial rhetoric coming out of the White House. And then when you have an actual incident of white nationalist terrorism like the killing in Charlottesville related to people saying Jews will not replace us, and the president saying he got very fine people there, of course this is part of a climate where people who are in the grip of this hateful extremist ideology feel validated, and they feel validated from all the way at the top, and that is part of our problem.
So we have this problem now. It's white nationalist terrorism. Okay? Jesse Smollett claimed to be a victim of white supremacist terrorism. He was attacked by guys in MAGA hats. Turns out it was guys he paid. A woman at a grocery store claims that a white guy told her to go back where she came from because she got in the wrong line with too many groceries and she's pregnant. Turns out the guy's not white, he's Hispanic and a Democrat. We have had false flag after lie after phony narrative. And now we've got a shooter in Dayton, Ohio, who is a radicalized socialist. But that, of course, we don't talk about. We're going to paint this guy in the El Paso shooting as a crazed Trump supporter. And obviously, Trump's got to go, and we need more gun control. I stated these stats already, and I'm going to state them again. Yes, our hearts do go out to the victims and the families here, and this is a tragic thing. I'm very suspect of the events which led up to it and the timing. And I know that the president is under all kinds of pressure, even from within his own sphere of counsel and advice and family, to give in to what the libloons and the Democrats want to do when it comes to things like gun control. Mr. President, you have got to appear to be taking the lead on this and make people feel safe. I love what the president did today. He wants to bring real resolve, not just go for scoring the political points. So let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about if there's this problem with white domestic terrorism that Beto, the phony Latino O'Rourke, our little Irish Hispanic boy, and Pete Buttigieg are touting. Again, where was the pushback from Chris Wallace? What about the 12 dead in Chicago this weekend? 12 dead in Chicago this weekend. 12 black individuals dead at the hands of other black assailants. Every week, week in and week out, there is wanton open violence in the streets of Chicago. Thousands die there annually. Black on black crime. Do we have a black nationalist terrorist problem in this country, Mr. Buttigieg? Yes, one senseless shooting, one death is heartbreaking and it is nauseating. Because it does impede on the reputation and the rights of millions of law-abiding gun citizens who are following the law and exercising their Second Amendment right. But if we want to talk numbers, let's talk numbers. 3,287 people will die today in this country. Today. Nearly 3,300 people before midnight tonight will have lost their lives today in automobile accidents. 1.3 million will die in car accidents this year alone. Another 50 to 60 million will be injured or permanently disabled in auto-related accidents this year. Are we going to outlaw the car? Are we going to ban the car? $1.3 million deaths annually due to vehicles. To get to 1.5 million deaths relating to guns and firearms, you have to go all the way back to 1968 and accumulate the stats from 1968 to now. 1.5 million over 50 years. 1.3 million annually. That means over 60 million dead over 50 years from automobiles. We're going to outlaw the car? Because remember, the hate monger killer in Charlotte used a car. He didn't use a gun. And every time there's one of these shootings, it's a different thing the liberals want. We want this particular gun, this style gun, this assault that, this handgun this type of firearm, this type of tip, this type of cartridge, this type of magazine. They want gun confiscation. And by the way, neither Beto or Pete or the rest of those DMs on any level care about a single victim. The president came out today. He showed his compassion. He showed his understanding. He's taking leadership. And I guarantee you that the Twitter world is blowing up, and I haven't even had to look at it today. And the cable news outlets at CNN and PMSNBC with their endless panels are no doubt decrying what the president said. Too little, too late. He doesn't mean it. He's giving lip service. No matter what this president does or doesn't do, he's taking the lead. Now show us that you're really interested in bipartisanship. Let's act on what he talked about. That's it. That's my rant for today. Thank you for all of the comments and encouragement. I really do appreciate it. And those of you that are sharing my channel with other places on social media, get the word out. Let's continue to grow this channel. I thank you so much for your support. Please make sure you're a subscriber and smack the bell for my next rant.